Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. In 2008, experts predicted that millions of people were going to flee to Antarctica to escape global warming. And in 2004, the chief scientist of the United Kingdom, Sir David King, said that global warming was going to make the rest of the world uninhabitable. He said that everyone was going to have to move to Antarctica, where temperatures sometimes get below minus 120 degrees. And in a certain sense, these predictions came true. Climate alarmists have fled the Arctic and Australia, and they've moved their scam to Antarctica. This animation was made from the Arctic sea ice extent graph from the National Snow and Ice Data Center here in Boulder, Colorado. After telling us endlessly that Arctic ice was melting at a record rate, Arctic sea ice extent is now higher than 13 of the last 15 years. And this is today's map from the same organization. It shows that Arctic sea ice extent is very close to the 1981 to 2010 median ice edge. And the problems for climate alarmists are getting worse. Sea ice growth so far in February has been the fastest since 1997. After decades of fear-mongering, this is quite a disaster for Arctic alarmists. And if that isn't bad enough, so far Alaska is having one of their coldest years on record, with incredibly cold temperatures. The forecast for Alaska shows continued near-record cold for the rest of the month. Last month, Greenland set their all-time record for cold at minus 86.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, the BBC, New York Times, and CNN aren't talking about this because it doesn't fit their agenda. And recently, New Delhi, India had their coldest day on record. It has been snowing in Saudi Arabia. A few weeks ago, hysteria about the Australian climate was quite the rage, but now they're flooded. This comes just a few weeks after the Australian Bureau of Meteorology said it wasn't going to rain until at least April. Many of the top climate scams from the past year have collapsed. So, just as climate alarmists predicted, they've fled and moved their scam to Antarctica. It's all over the news that Antarctica just had their hottest day on record at 18.3 Celsius. 65 degrees Fahrenheit doesn't sound that hot to me. Most people heat their homes above that temperature because it's too cold, and of course they use fossil fuels. And here's the tweet. February 7th, 2020, 18.3 degrees Celsius, new highest temperature recorded for continental Antarctica. The claimed record temperature occurred right at the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, which is about 2,000 miles away from the South Pole. It's about the same distance from the South Pole as Oslo, Norway is from the North Pole. Nobody would be very surprised to see 18 degrees Celsius at Oslo, Norway. In fact, it gets much warmer there. The story is already pretty lame, but it gets much worse. Wikipedia says that a higher temperature of 19.8 degrees Celsius at Signy Research Station was recorded in January 1982. This is the location of the new fake record, and this is the location of the actual record from 1982. So it was actually 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer in 1982. Climate alarmists love to talk about islands like the Maldives, but for some reason they're pretending that this island doesn't exist. The fact that it's not technically a part of the Antarctic continent is meaningless from a climatological point of view. The two stations are close to each other, and they're also both very similar geographically and geologically. The fact that they're ignoring the real record from 1982 shows once again just how dishonest climate alarmists are. Chris Mart sent me this picture of the new fake record location. They had a few hours of mild temperatures caused by downslope winds coming off of the higher elevations. This is very similar to what happens all the time along the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains when we get Chinook winds. A few years ago, climate alarmist Leo DiCaprio made the exact same ridiculous mistake. He thought that a warm Chinook wind in Alberta was caused by global warming. We get those sort of downslope winds here in Boulder, Colorado all the time, and temperatures can warm up 30 or 40 degrees in a few minutes. It has nothing to do with carbon dioxide or global warming. Now let's look at what Antarctic temperatures actually are in the middle of summer. Today it is minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit in the interior of Antarctica, and the peninsula is a little bit warmer. It's about 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit up there. Chris Martz also sent over this picture showing how the vast majority of Antarctica is extremely cold in the middle of summer. There are not a lot of climate refugees fleeing to Antarctica. In fact, I'm headed to Costa Rica for a week next month to get out of the cold in Colorado. This is how climate alarmists see the world. Cold areas are climate change and warm areas are global warming. This is the current NOAA sea surface temperature anomaly map. Sea surface temperatures in much of the southern hemisphere, and particularly around Antarctica, are running well below normal temperature. It's very cold in Antarctica, but that's not what climate alarmists want you to believe. The Sunday Times is reporting Antarctica has hit its highest temperature on record with a reading of 18.3 degrees Celsius at a research station on its rocky peninsula. We know this claim isn't true. Antarctica was 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer in 1982. And John King from the British Antarctic Survey said that the single record was less troubling than the trend. That's fair enough. Let's look at the trend. In 2004, Gavin Schmidt, who's now NASA's top climate alarmist, wrote this paper. He said that during recent decades, surface temperatures had decreased significantly over most of Antarctica. And in 2005, NASA published this map of trends in Antarctica over the past few decades. It showed in blue that most of Antarctica had cooled significantly. The blue in this map shows areas of cooling. But cooling didn't fit NASA's agenda, so in 2009, after Barack Obama became president, the cooling changed to warming. It's the same story we've seen over and over again, with NASA changing their data from cooling to warming. This graph from Remote Sensing System shows satellite-measured temperatures of the lower troposphere over Antarctica. It shows that there's been almost no trend since the start of records in 1979. And this graph shows the same data set with the 12-month mean plotted as the red line. You can see the temperatures peaked in Antarctica shortly after 1980, which is very close to the actual record temperature, which was set in 1982. These satellite sea ice maps were published by National Geographic in November 1976. The map on the left showed that there was almost no sea ice left around Antarctica in January of 1976. And here's a really interesting article from the Chicago Tribune dated January 9, 1977. Flood threat from polar ice. Ross Ice Shelf, Antarctica. A huge portion of the Antarctic ice mass appears to be collapsing into the sea, a catastrophe that could raise the levels of the ocean by almost 20 feet. We're doing about the most we can right now to study the possible collapse of the West Ice Sheet, said Dr. Richard Cameron, National Science Foundation Program Manager for Glaciology. We're seeing the West Ice Sheet on its way out, said Cameron. It has nothing to do with a warmer climate, just the dynamics of unstable ice. This point is very important. Scientists have understood for at least 45 years that what's been going on with the ice in Antarctica has nothing to do with global warming. And at the time, scientists were worried about global cooling. Sunday, March 2, 1975. New ice age on way soon. In the last decade, the Arctic ice and snowcaps has expanded 12%, and for the first time in this century, ships making for Iceland ports have been impeded by drifting ice. Now let's go back another 40 years. It was reported in 1932 that the Ross Ice Shelf had retreated at least 30 miles since it was first seen and surveyed. Sir James Ross, who went out on the earliest Antarctic expedition of the 19th century, and those who followed him, left clear descriptions of this tremendous ice frontage and its position. It was a cliff 150 feet high and 1,000 feet thick. But now it appears to be continuing its century-long process of shrinking, and that process may have been going on for centuries. Whatever is going on in Antarctica has been going on for a very long time, and obviously has nothing to do with carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Climate alarmists have fled the Arctic and Australia after their scams collapsed there, and it won't be long before their scam in Antarctica collapses too. NASA reported in 2015 that Antarctica is actually gaining ice. But people like Bernie Sanders, who are using climate alarm to push socialism, aren't interested in facts. A few months ago he said Antarctica is melting 3 times faster than it was just 10 years ago. Climate change is real, very real. But as is normally the case with Bernie, he's simply making stuff up. Climate alarmists are not interested in facts, and they're using this recent fake record temperature as the basis of their latest scam. Last summer it was reported that Antarctica had set the world's record cold temperature. During the long, dark Antarctica winter, temperatures dropped low enough to resemble other planets. The temperature they measured, a stunning negative 144 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 97.8 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, just a few breaths of air would induce hemorrhaging in your lungs and quickly lead to death. For some reason, the press isn't talking about this. And I doubt that there's a lot of global warming refugees fleeing to minus 144 degree temperatures. But climate alarmists tell me that I lack the credentials to challenge someone of such stature as the chief scientist of the United Kingdom. Sir David King is an expert, and he knows that we're all going to be moving to Antarctica soon. In 1841, Charles Mackay wrote this great book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. He wrote, "Men, it has been well said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one." And that's what I'm doing with these videos, helping people recover their senses after decades of brainwashing and propaganda. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.